Hello and welcome back to the Halo series. My name is Douglas Brown, CEO at Halo Consulting. Today we are joined by Paul O'Brien, the CEO at MediaTech Ventures. Thanks for joining us today, Paul. How are you today?
Doug, great to see you live. Fantastic, thank you. Hello to everybody from Austin, Texas, where it's hot and humid right now. So come enjoy some time here during the summer with us.
If you're new to this event, Halo hosts monthly virtual roundtables covering current trends in the HR, tech, and DEI space. Don't forget to check out the Halo mini-series, where we hear from executives taking a deep dive into a multi-part series discussing what's keeping them up at night. If you've enjoyed this content, hit that like or subscribe button and be sure to visit Halo's LinkedIn page to subscribe to the Halo Content Hub, which summarizes current market trends and recaps past events. And that link can be found in our description. Throughout our session, we will cover the role of venture development, fostering collaboration and growth. Before we kick off the questions, let's get started with you, Paul. Can you share with our listeners where you started your career and how did it ultimately evolve into you starting your own company, MediaTech Ventures?
Well, I think if you caught my reaction, I think it started with exactly what you characterized, that we focus on the things that keep people up at night, especially when it comes to technology. Hi, everybody. I grew up in Michigan when the economy was soft. And I ended up in Silicon Valley when it was the oddest place in the world to be. So imagine the dichotomy of that kind of experience in both your profession and your life, that I've been on both sides of the table. What it looks like when an ecosystem doesn't work well, when employers can't afford to put people to work, when resources are lacking, when technology is insufficient or is misunderstood. To exactly the opposite extreme when capital is flush and people are hiring and employees and the professionals actually have some control over their destiny because they're in such demand that they have some influence over employers and companies. And more importantly, what it looks like when we understand what the technology is doing, what it means to an ecosystem that's very quickly disrupting and changing and improving things. That's what led to my work. About 14 years ago, I moved to Austin, Texas. So well before this and popular for passion in Texas. And it was a result of moving out of Silicon Valley that I saw that much of the rest of the world could benefit from understanding better how we build ecosystem, how we put technology to work both to our benefit and to disrupt things, so that we can not have as many things that keep us up late at night. We can start businesses and start companies that minimize the amount of stress possible, that benefit from the fact that advisors and investors and partners who have experience with these kind of things really can make it a lot easier for you to start something and build something enduring and meaningful, and so that you can control your destiny as best as possible without necessarily understanding everything that's going on in the world, and without being kept up all night worrying about the things that you're not familiar with.
Yeah, Paul, you've had a remarkable career as an online technology and startup veteran, and you've had the ability to impact so many entrepreneurs throughout your career. In addition to founding Funded House, which is their mission is to help fund startup leaders and help them navigate the difficult task of growing their businesses, along with founding Collective, which is a media technology incubator developing idea stage and pre-seed stage startups through a global platform for media innovation. So really glad to have you on today.
Thank you. Those actually are a lot of big buzzwords when you hear it, aren't they? We started Funded House to do what? We started Collective to help what? And the bottom line is rather simple in the way that I like to characterize it. We're in the business of teaching people how funding works for companies. And I mean people, not just the founders and the entrepreneurs. What I learned when we moved to Austin, Texas, was that the better part of the challenge in our ecosystems in different cities throughout the world is that the capital class doesn't understand what we do. The investors don't understand how Google works or Facebook works, let alone ChatGPT and blockchain and NFTs and all of the new things that are emerging. And so imagine the implication of that when the capital class, when the investor class doesn't understand how we build companies today. How on earth can it make a a meaningful decision about whether or not to invest in you based on a pitch deck. And so a lot of the work that we do is actually teaching the capital class what it means to develop companies and to be successful as a startup or a new business in today's world, so that the capital moves more effectively and efficiently. That in a nutshell is what venture development is called. And so we do that in a few ways. Funded House is a series of talks and events and conferences that we collaborate in with other partners throughout the world. And our incubators are a way that we teach founders how to build a startup, so that they aren't really accelerating a startup through us like you might in a Techstars or Y Combinator. Rather, we're teaching them literally what are the legal considerations? How do you do marketing? How do you decide on what kind of software developers to put in place? We're teaching them so that they can make better decisions about how to build a company that's likely to work.
And Paul, as you continue to embark on your entrepreneurial journey, what's the story and mission behind MediaTech Ventures?
Really, two things. 1970s, there was an economist and a management consultant by the name of Peter Drucker who was celebrated for decades until the internet caused the pace change to move much more quickly and change our understanding or our perception of marketing. Peter Drucker, though, in the 70s, recognized the fundamental fact. That only two things create value in the economy: in marketing, innovation. And he went on to add that marketing is the distinguishing of the two. You can be innovative. If you're not doing marketing, no one cares. You're probably making mistakes. You're probably wasting resources. So we then set out to recognize and help people understand that despite the fact that the internet is constantly disrupting things and either making it easier or making it more difficult to be a business, depending on your experience with the internet, the fact remains true that marketing and technology are the most important things that you invest in. And that's what media technology is. Media technology is better understanding everything from podcasting, as we're doing here with something like OBS or Video Ninja or live streaming to LinkedIn. But media is also in advertising. It's how the news business works. It's how social media works. It's how to build your own website, how to design an app properly. These skills, these technologies are critical to every business today. And whether you understand how to do that yourself or you make the sound and efficient and effective decisions to outsource it meaningfully depends on the kind of advice, the kind of experience that you have. So MediaTech Ventures is a company that does two things. We teach founders how to do that, and we teach the ecosystem how to do that. Venture development is effectively building an ecosystem meaningfully, recognizing that the media industry and effective use of the media industry is the most important part of what your city, what your ecosystem might be doing. Let me rephrase that. Whether or not your city or your ecosystem is focused on real estate tech or biotech or ag tech, or if you're a big fintech ecosystem like New York, the bottom line is if you don't understand my world first and foremost and most, and if you don't invest in this world, media world, first and foremost, then the journalists don't know how to cover your ecosystem. The podcasters and influencers don't know how to talk about your ecosystem. You lack a social media community for your biotech ecosystem. You are unable to properly educate and support the founders in your ed tech ecosystem, so that those founders are effectively reaching people, promoting what they're working on, developing customers, developing markets. And so while you may be innovative in the ecosystem that you have in your city or your region or world, if the media doesn't work, nothing else does. So we teach people how to focus on making sure the media side works by building those startups and building those founders, but then likewise teaching the investors, teaching the chambers of commerce and the government and the city how to make sure that they too are playing the part that's important in being an innovative entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Well said, Paul. There's a statement on the MediaTech investor page that really resonated with me. The media industry is set to create all new jobs directly and indirectly, as media is what promotes, communicates, and teaches. Every new business and entrepreneur begins with media.
I've been challenging myself to put that more eloquently. And I've been challenging myself because your listeners, we often get into this debate with folks, and your listeners will probably appreciate the point that I'm going to make. That when we say media, too many people, unfortunately, too many people think we are referring to the news business, news media. Right? That's the colloquial, conventional word associated with media. When we say media, they'll think we're teaching them how news works. That's a huge mistake. And we see that mistake is drawn from another huge mistake, that when we say marketing, marketing is the most important thing you do. Marketing is the only thing that creates value. What on earth did Peter Drucker mean by that? Most businesses hear that and think, we're not ready to do advertising. We're not ready to promote our business. Marketing doesn't work because we spent money on Facebook and we didn't get customers out of it. So obviously marketing doesn't work. These are two massive misconceptions. Media is not just the news business. Media is every form of communication that exists. Media is every form of communication that exists. So yes, as Doug shared in citing what we have on the website, if you as a small business or an entrepreneur or a startup founder, if you do not understand how to leverage media on your behalf, you will fail, period, end of discussion. We know this with certainty. And this is why media is so important to whatever it is that you're doing. Media is so important to whatever it is that you're doing. Likewise.
It really is. And appreciate that insight.
Likewise.
Let's pivot to the investor side. From your perspective, what are the key indicators entrepreneurs should consider before seeking investment from investors?
Yeah, it's a great segue because likewise, the greatest concern that we have and what we help people overcome, the sake of investment is that if you don't understand what marketing actually means, you're not raising capital. Period. Marketing is the work of studying the industry. It's understanding competitors and potential partners, not just customers, not just how to grow. Marketing is not advertising. Advertising is something that the marketing organization will do if and when it determines that it should. But what's more important to the investor class is that you understand how to keep track of what's going on in your market, and you know how to develop a market and the competitive advantage in that space. That investors are seeking exactly what Peter Drucker pointed out, that you have to, one, be innovative. You have to be doing something new and distinct and different. Because if you're not doing something new and distinct and different, being innovative, you're effectively just another business. Mm-hmm. That's not a criticism. It's not a criticism at all, right? There are a lot of new restaurants that open all the time, and new restaurants aren't necessarily innovative. They're providing a service. They're providing a product that people seek. That's not what venture capital is looking for. Venture capital is looking for something innovative and different so that it can be substantial and disruptive and meaningful in changing the world and delivering a great return on that investment. So it has to be different, it has to be innovative. Well, how does it do that in the most efficient and effective way possible? It must be marketing effectively, not promoting itself. It must be marketing effectively. It must be looking at what's going on in the market. What are the trends in the market? Who are the competitors in the market? So that as a new venture that could and should be fundable, as a new venture, we investors know that you aren't going to be making mistakes that other people have already made. That you aren't going to be put out of business by competitors who can do what you're doing more effectively than you. That's what marketing is focused on best understanding. And the best indicator, since you asked that question, Doug, the best indicator of an opportunity to the investor class that you are doing marketing well is in the team that you have in place. If you are doing marketing well, two things happen. One, people want to join you, which means you have a team. Other people invest first. They want to join you as co-founders or team members because you are developing something that is of value or developing an opportunity that is of value. Number two, you are putting in place the people necessary to be competitive, to be innovative. You have a team that is capable of doing that. And the only way that you know, as a founder, that you know how to be competitive and innovative is if you're studying the market and discovering that you need a certain set of team members to fill a certain set of roles, in your case in particular, and that team should be exceptional for what you're doing. It's rather easy to find. It's rather easy to see. There's a conventional wisdom that we like to share in venture capital with venture capitalists, which is that I can't guarantee you a successful investment, but I can almost always tell when a venture is going to fail. We can determine, we can see the things that aren't going to work out. We know what to avoid. And so we can deliver much better returns if we just focus on what it means to understand the market, looking for innovative opportunities, and finding the teams that are capable of delivering returns in those ecosystems.
Yeah. We'll get to some common mistakes that startup executives should avoid. But in the same vein, Paul, what key factors should investors look for when evaluating a startup investment opportunity?
That's a big question because it depends on the industry and it depends on the stage,
Hmm.
frankly. And what we've seen in the last 5 years is that there are a lot more LPs, people who invest in venture funds. We're seeing a lot more LPs who are looking for sector-specific experience and funds. Sector-specific experience and funds. What do I mean by that? That historically, through Silicon Valley, with organizations like Sequoia or First Round Capital, you have these large venture capital firms that invest in a wide variety of things, looking for those substantial opportunities. And you saw out of that fund model the same kind of thing that happened in 500 Startups or Y Combinator, that we're going to be involved in a wide variety of things, hoping to find the one or two outcomes that are successful. The challenge in that model as it was that largely requires this notion of a unicorn, that we're seeking these really, really big successful outcomes, really, really big successful ventures and new companies, because we need to overcome all of the losses that we also invested, since we're taking this broad approach. Well, what we've seen emerge in the last 5 years is that LPs are signaling to venture capitalists, hey, we want you to focus instead on specific sectors that you know, partners that you can develop that are related to that, so that we benefit from the experience and the community related to that specific industry, right? Rather than chasing fintech because there's opportunity in fintech that you think is exciting, but you don't know anything about fintech. Stay focused on the stuff that you know, because your ecosystem, your partner, your community, your network is all aligned to that ecosystem. We're going to see better returns. So we're looking at venture capitalists, encouraging them to do the same thing. Right? As in our case, as an example, if you invest in media or you want to invest in media, call us. We know how that industry works. We're seeing all the deal flow. If you want to invest in biotech, that's wonderful. But I don't know anything about biotech, so why would you be working with us? Why would you be looking to us to work in biotech, for example? And it's critical to understand why that's manifesting. The healthcare industry has certain regulations associated with it, has certain roadblocks associated with it developing innovation in healthcare. And so it's going to work a lot differently than the video game industry. And it's silly to expect a venture fund or an incubator or an accelerator to understand all of those things, because innovation and building companies in those very different industries absolutely does not work in the same way. The fundamentals are the same, marketing and innovation. But whether or not you can build a company that's successful in those ecosystems is drastically different. And so we're looking for more investors who understand that and appreciate that, and we want to focus on the strengths in other partners, other funds, other programs that know that industry in particular, so that we can deliver better returns.
Yeah, that was really well said, Paul. And it sounds like investors should really focus on their niche specific, sectors and being related to that versus, kind of the spray and the spray approach in terms of investing in a variety of different sectors and industries.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's not even necessarily a spray notion. One of the biggest disruptions that the startup ecosystem has been trying to teach is stop saying you're in the tech industry. Stop saying you're in the tech industry. That is a shotgun approach. That is a spray approach. There is technology literally in everything. In the fashion business, there is technology. in the food and beverage business industry, there is technology. So stop saying you're in tech, because tech is just an underpinning of all innovation in every sector. Define the sector more explicitly and focus on that space.
This is a good segue into our next question. How do the investment criteria and strategies differ between PE and VC firms, and what factors should go into play on the founder side versus the investor side?
Yeah, that's a great question because it extends the point that we were just exploring a little bit, that the answer to what investors are looking for largely actually depends on what sector they're in, and in the case of what you're asking, Doug, what stage or what context they have as a source of capital. Venture capital versus private equity, right? We can also distinguish that from angel investors, which, by the way, we should distinguish from business investors. That these are all different classes of capital. Generally speaking, a venture capitalist, a venture capital firm, is a set of partners that are actually in the business of raising money. They're putting together a fund, and they manage that fund, and they're responsible for deploying those investments on behalf of the limited partners, the investors, deploying those investments as effectively as possible so that they can bring a return back to the fund and deliver capital back to the investors in that fund. That's what venture capital means. Now, so you as a founder can appreciate how that means those people that you're talking to, those general partners, those venture capitalists, they have a certain fiscal responsibility to their investors that changes what you should think about and how you should think about things. That's different than private equity. Private equity actually largely works the same way, but it's got a different purpose. It's got a different context generally. And that purpose and context is later stage. Later stage, when you are looking to raise substantial amounts of capital because you've become a massive company, or you are moving on to perhaps an acquisition, being acquired, or you'd like to go public. Then you start looking at something like private equity because those investors and that management team, those partners, have a different set of experiences and expectations than venture capitalists do. And likewise, to make the point that I started with, that's very different than what an angel investor, who is an individual investing in a lot of startups, knowing that they will lose a lot of the money because they're looking for startups that can deliver returns. That's very different from a business investor who's investing in more reliable, known business models, often that have revenue, have customers. All of those individuals have very different expectations of you as a startup founder. And so it's important to appreciate, depending on the stage you're at as a founder, depending on what you're working on, you should be having conversations with the right kinds of investors so that you get the best feedback and advice and direction possible, so that you can actually raise capital or get funding when it's appropriate to what you're doing.
And Paul, moving on to the next question, what advice would you give potential investors to determine what type of investment, if it's PE or VC, is more suitable for their investment goals, and what factors should be considered?
It's really rather simple, and we sort of covered it, right? Is the team capable? It's surprising to me how often venture capital investors, frankly, will neglect to give direction and feedback to start. We see a lot of trying to raise capital, and no one really ever sits down with the founder and says, "Your pitch deck is fantastic. The idea is brilliant. I love the traction you've got." You don't have anyone in charge of and marketing. Bless you, but this just isn't going to work without that. This just isn't going to work without that role or a chief operating officer, or a head of business, or a head of business. Not prescribing that the role of marketing. What I mean is that what's often overlooked is the fundamental fact almost every startup lives or dies based on the team. Period. And so investors, are you looking for the right team? Are you looking at the team that's in place? Are you advising the startup that you're talking to fill the team appropriately so that it can be fundable? Number one. Number two, is there a marketing first mentality? Right? And again, not growth and advertising, not customer adoption, but do you know all of the competitors in the space? Are you keeping track of the trends and the changes going on in the market? Are you, as founders, are the founders aware of the implications of the economy or the implications of AI? Are you aware of these things? Are you pivoting very quickly as a founder based on what the market is doing? If you're not pivoting very quickly, you're not getting funding. You're not. If you're pivoting quickly, right? We know you are taking as many chances as possible to try to be innovative, to try to build something successful and meaningful. That's a more fundable company. Now, all of those considerations, all those characteristics that I just shared with you are appropriate to that venture capital or even that angel investor set of expectations. It's not the same at the private equity stage, right? At the private equity stage, you should have a company in place. You should have a team in place. You should have a recurring business model. You should have growth expectations that you continue to hit. You should have acquisition expectations or even merger considerations available. You're at the point where you need a substantial amount of capital to be doing different things based on some reliability and stability as an organization. That's not the role that venture capital plays. That's not the role that angel investors play. They're expecting you to be able to pivot, be efficient, be effective, test and learn, and focus on the things that work well so that you can build a company that becomes meaningful to private equity.
Paul, you mentioned from a VC perspective that startups live and die based on their team. From your experience, how often are you coming across startups or founding executives that aren't being advised accurately or in the right light?
Oh God, almost always. So we run incubators throughout the world, and through those incubators, we'll see firsthand 1,000 or so founders. And certainly more founders come through us with enrollment applications or ideas. And rarely, if ever, is a founder's mindset oriented to the fact that I am not going to continue this without 2 or 3 other partners, without 2 or 3 other co-founders. Almost every startup we see is an individual who wants to start a company. Every startup we see, almost, is an individual who wants to start a company. And so as you look at the frustration that exists in the ecosystem with, why can't I raise capital? Why won't venture capitalists support what I'm doing? Why is it so difficult to raise money or get funding for my venture? Well, because no company in the history of the world was built on the shoulders of one person. Focus on the team. When you're pitching, when you're learning to pitch, or you're getting your startup off the ground, when you're getting your idea out there in the ecosystem, the single most important thing that you should be focusing on is finding other people who want to do that with you. That's the first sign of traction. The first sign of traction. Traction is another misunderstood concept in the ecosystem. Traction doesn't mean you have customers. Traction doesn't mean you have revenue. Traction doesn't even mean you have growth. Do you have other people who are starting this venture with you? If you don't, think about it. It's a very strong signal that, hang on, you can't even get somebody else to join you? And you want funding? Come on. So the most valuable thing that we can teach people, the most valuable thing that we can do in venture development, building ecosystems, the most valuable thing we can do in our schools, in entrepreneurship programs at universities, or even in high schools where we've got these small business programs, is you must do so with others. You must start communicating what you're doing, talking about what you're doing, focusing first, on getting other people to invest their time, their experience, their work in what you're doing to build something together. In what you're doing to build something, period, together.
In really well said, Paul. In terms of the venture development, I think you made a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and it was a really comprehensive overview of what investors are looking for in terms of addressing the problem, having a solution and the value prop, having a strong business model, knowing the competition, and then having a strong founding team. And that post really resonated to me and called out, what investors are looking for across the board, and is a really good place to start for someone that is early on in their entrepreneurial journey.
Well, everybody, if you want to take a look at the post that's referring to, it's in fact a series. Pop on LinkedIn, connect with me. Click the little bell on LinkedIn, just like you click the bell these days on YouTube or wherever else you're watching the show. You click these bells so that you get an alert, you get an update when there's a new article or a new podcast or a video from somebody. So click that bell on LinkedIn because what we're working on is a series for LinkedIn about how to put together the ideal pitch. And I say ideal because there, in fact, is no right answer. That's not the right pitch or correct pitch. What we're exploring is what does it mean to communicate and focus on the things that are most likely to be meaningful. And Doug's referring to the first in the series, which is a reference to a wonderful chart that highlights the 20 or so things 20 or so most common things that accelerators and investors ask to see in a pitch deck. And the reason the ideal pitch deck is a wonderful way for founders to learn what matters is think about this, everybody. Not because of what goes in the pitch deck, but because it's direction for you as a founder to think about what matters to prioritize and focus on. Right? The problem slide, for example, that Doug's referring to. The problem slide. Do I really need to see a problem slide? Not necessarily. I mean, it could be in your email, it could be in your talking points to me. Right? Do I really need to see a problem slide? No. But as a startup founder, if you're not focused on an actual problem that people will pay for, will value, if you're not focused on how to build an enduring competitive company related to solving that problem, and if you're not focused on understanding the market and whether or not competition will beat you to solving that problem, then you're done. Then there's nothing to even invest in. And so as a founder, what are you actually doing? What are you actually focusing on if you're not fixated with this problem in every conceivable way? Rather than what most do, rather than saying, hey, I have some people who will pay me to fix this. Okay, well, that's a business. Or rather than being fixated on your solution, right? What you think is the solution. I don't care what you think is the solution. I care what is the solution, right? So I want you to be fixated on the problem because I need to know that you will do whatever it takes to solve that problem. This pitch series is called Pitch Perfect. Go ahead and ping me on LinkedIn, or like I said, it's a series. We're going to have another 15 or so articles coming out over the next few months. And so it's a great series of articles that we're going to put together as well in a book and a podcast as well, exploring each of the slides and doing whatever we can to teach people what it is that you should be focused on as a startup founder, because this is what the investors and the accelerators tend to be saying matters most. Let's explore that with everybody.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out, Paul. The next question we'd like to ask, how can startups and founders present themselves in the best possible light to potential investors, if it's PE or VC, and what common mistakes should be avoided?
Yeah, that's always a tricky question, because what I like to do is encourage people to question everything. What I mean by that is question the conventional wisdom. What are the best things for founders to do, or what are the mistakes of it? Well, one of the best things that you are advised to do is be a lean startup. Focus on product market fit. Be a lean startup. Okay, so there's really great advice. But at the same time, as an enduring, passionate, committed founder, what I actually want to hear from you is that you're questioning whether or not that's even correct or true. Question everything. When you communicate that you have a product market fit, for example, everybody, when you communicate that you have a product market fit, that sets a certain set of expectations in my brain as your audience. You have product market fit? Awesome. I'm going to then presume you have revenue and customers and partners that want to join you and a lot of people that want to join your team, because you clearly have product market fit, right? Or maybe you don't. And it's okay if you don't, right? It's okay if you don't. That's my point. What I want you to do as a startup founder is appreciate that the advice is valid, but you have to be careful about what it communicates or what it conveys to your audience, to the investor class. And so don't make the mistake of saying something with confidence and certainty because that's the advice that you heard matters most, if in fact saying that conveys something that is problematic given what you're doing and what you're working on. A lot of advice that people will hear too is to focus on the customer. Focus on customers, right? It's sound, it makes sense. Shouldn't you focus on the customer? Of course you should. Keep in mind, Facebook, TikTok, there are thousands of massive companies that didn't have customers for years, didn't make money off of customers for years. Because if you're being innovative, you perhaps don't know yet or you can't depend on what the existing customer base in your market thinks and wants. If you're being innovative, how can you talk to customers and say, if I need something completely different, is that right? Will you pay for that? Well, they're not going to be honest with you. They're not even going to know themselves until you've built it, until you've done it, until you've delivered it. So how can you focus on the customer? How can you possibly focus on the customer? Great advice that I hear from angel investors is, if the customer is always right, then they'll be rich. They'll be doing it. If the investor is always right, why the heck are they an investor? Why don't they go build Microsoft? Because we don't know what the answers are. You can't depend on the customer. You can't depend on the customer necessarily, right? So the conventional wisdom, the advice is on one hand, great advice. Follow that. That's the answer to your question, Doug. On the other hand, it absolutely can be wrong. And so be careful of making the mistake of focusing on the wrong things or communicating the wrong things to potential investors. Because you don't want to set expectations in the investor's brain that prevent you from having any more meaningful conversation. Led them to believe something about your venture that isn't actually true, or isn't actually right, or isn't actually best in your case. All of that depends on the market. And really, marketing, again, is the work of figuring out, should you be this kind of venture or that kind of venture? Should you focus on this or that? What is it that matters to the investor class? What matters to the investor class is that you're going to build an enduring company that can compete and deliver a substantial return in the future. How exactly you focus on and build and communicate that really rather depends on exactly what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I think in your response, what really resonated with me, Paul, is the ability to question everything, and to be hyper aware of how you communicate outwards about your startup or your firm itself in terms of product market fit. Definitely some things that I'll take away from this conversation and think of. So appreciate that. And Paul, from your experience, what qualities are important that a venture capital firm should possess that a potential founder might find insightful?
Oh, wonderful question, because we're seeing an explosion of interest in people being investors, right? We're seeing a lot more angel investors. We're seeing a lot more individuals want to participate in startups. We're seeing crowdfunding and groups and syndicates, and a lot more opportunity for people to become an investor. When it comes to the startup ecosystem, we actually tell people to not become an investor. Become an LP. The startup sector of our economy, everybody, is by design meant to fail a lot. It is the fail state of our economy, right? We don't want to see small businesses failing. We don't want to see big companies failing. We really don't. You may not like big tech or big companies, but the reality is we don't want big companies failing all the time. But startups are meant to. And that may sound a little perverted, but it's very, very true. Because the only way we can invent new things is to try things that are unlikely to work. In the private sector, within pharmaceutical companies or within tech companies, we call this R&D. You know how much money large organizations spend on R&D to try things that they never bring to market? Why don't they ever bring it to market? Because it didn't work. Because that drug was poorly formulated, and it screwed with people's health. Or this technology failed or didn't deliver what we needed to deliver. Right? That's R&D in a company, in an organization. The startup sector of our economy is the R&D of our economy. It's the research and development stage or phase of our ecosystem. So here's what it means. If you want to be an investor, if you want to be an angel investor, if you want to be a venture capitalist, your job is to fund things that fail. And again, sounds perverted, doesn't it? I mean, why on earth would you do that? You fund things that fail because that's the only way we're going to find things that work. And we do find things that work. That what we're looking for out of investors, what we're looking for in people becoming investors, is that you have the means and you have the risk tolerance to invest in dozens of companies, not one or two, dozens, because 10 of them are going to fail, 20 of them are going to fail. You're funding all of these attempts to try new things. You're, in fact, very philanthropic, if you think about it, because you're teaching, you're enabling founders to try things. You're enabling entrepreneurs to learn how to start something. The average age of a successful startup founder is, how old, everybody? Drop it in the comments. 44 years old. 44 years old. You know why? Because at 20, people are trying and learning and getting experience and failing a lot until they come up with a better idea. And then they have some network and they have some resources, and so they can do something in their late 30s or their 40s that is successful. The role and responsibility of investors in the startup class is to fund those things happening. That's what we're looking for. And you do get great returns. Amongst successful funds, amongst successful startup programs like ours, the rate of return is pretty good. And again, what we're seeing, though, is the rate of return is improving because we're getting more sector specific, like MediaTech, like biotech. And so if you want to be an investor, the smartest thing you can do is to fund other things in your sector, fund other programs, fund other funds, become an LP, which means be an investor in a venture capital fund for the sector that you're interested in. Because those general partners who are launching and managing that fund, they know what they're doing. They have experience. You, bless you, probably don't. Not many people have experience investing in or launching startups. And so why would you just throw money at trying it when you yourself don't even have trying it? When you yourself don't even have people who know what they're trying. Put it with the people because we need much more capital for the entrepreneurial class. We need to be more innovative in this country and in this economy. And that depends on people being accessible and available and taking the risks to do so.
As we wrap up with our last two questions, Paul, who should reach out to you and why? And what's the best way to connect with you or get in touch with our listeners?
We sit in a very unique place in the economy. And unique, I mean only in the sense that we're in the media technology space, but unique because of what we do called venture development. Venture development is building an ecosystem, which means we literally kind of sit in the middle of everything. We work with big companies, we work with entrepreneurs, we work with city governments, we work with state governments, we work with Chamber of Commerce, we work with universities, we work with investors in media technology. So if you're in biotech, for example, by all means, reach out, because I'd love to talk to you about how we do what we do for the sake of your sector, but we're not in your sector. We're in our space. And so whether you're a company executive or a head of innovation at Netflix, or you're an investor in video games, or you're an entrepreneur trying to do something with music technology, or you're a conference like South by Southwest or the Consumer Electronics Show, CES in Las Vegas, those are industries in our sector. Those are the kinds of people that reach out to us. We do consult with and enable other sectors to learn how to do what we do. Venture development is not unique to us. There are about 10 organizations in the world that do it. And so if you want to learn how to play this role in your ecosystem, whatever that might be, reach out as well. But if you really want to work with us, we're going to be most effective and most meaningful in technology. And the best way to connect with us, honestly, is, as I mentioned, is on LinkedIn. I've been on the internet since the mid-90s. And so I've moved on from thinking email is a great thing. I've moved on from even wanting text messages or phone calls anymore. I live and die on social media, in particular LinkedIn. Easiest way to reach out to me and have a conversation with me is find me there. If that's not your ideal platform, that's fine. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on whatever else is next. I don't do TikTok, but maybe I should. Social media. Yeah, not yet. I haven't figured out the right dance or the right meme or the right way to be funny on TikTok. I'm working on it.
And Paul, the last question we have for you, is there anything you'd like to talk about or share in terms of the work that you're doing today at MediaTech Ventures, or anything you're up to personally?
Personally is a great one. Let's stop there, because I think it's a great way to wrap up all of the things we've been talking about. Your audience, I'm sure, appreciates that in the last 6 years or so, Austin seemingly has become the hottest spot in the world. And I'm saying that with a bit of sarcasm in my voice because it's not entirely correct. It's not entirely true. But I'm sure you've heard it, right? We've been in the press a lot as a city. There's a reason people are moving here. How did that happen? It didn't just happen. It doesn't just happen overnight. Silicon Valley didn't just happen overnight. It started in the 60s and finally became this hub of internet innovation in the 90s and 2000s. Right? It took decades to get there. That a lot of what I do personally is loving the fact that we can do this elsewhere. We can do this together. We can build your ecosystem to be substantial. That I've moved on personally, since your question, I've moved on personally from Austin itself to starting to help do the same thing with the rest of Texas. And so I'm trying to think bigger. I'm trying to think about whether or not we can move on from a city to a region. And MediaTech Ventures works with lots of regions throughout the world. We've got partners in Colombia and Singapore and a bunch of other countries. But I'm personally curious about whether or not we can turn what happened in Austin into what happened for Texas, or what happens for Texas. It's almost a personal passion to prove something, if you will. That if you think about it, there's a reason behind my interest in that, and that's that while Austin boomed and became something that was really exciting for everybody, the fact is Silicon Valley is not one city. Silicon Valley is Berkeley and San Francisco and Oakland and San Jose and Sand Hill Road around Stanford, where a lot of the investors can be found. It's this pretty massive region of California. And so for Austin to remain substantial, we have to appreciate what it means through San Antonio and Houston and Dallas and become ourselves much more of a region that's collaborative and innovative. And so what I'd love to talk with people personally about is if you're in Atlanta or Nashville or Chicago or London or Barcelona or Liège, Belgium, or somewhere in South Africa, what does that look like to instead think regional? And then bring it back to a city. Let's build a city and an ecosystem, be much more innovative and entrepreneurial, but then recognize that regionally you have tremendous potential to be a strong part of the economy of the future, whether that's as an entrepreneurial city or a technology-based city or a creative class or just the kind of culture that supports and builds new ventures so that your economy becomes a part of building jobs and building the workforce and building returns for investors, as well as having a thriving economy of small businesses and new businesses and local businesses where people are making a good living.
Thanks again for your time, Paul. Keep up the great work in the VC world and educating entrepreneurs, and we look forward to staying connected moving forward.
Cheers, everyone. Great to chat with y'all.